We watched Howl's Moving Castle, which is a movie that I don't know, I don't hear that many people talking about it. I think this one was my favorite. I think I enjoyed this the most. I've come to realize I think I just prefer Miyazaki movies when he kind of stays away from surrealism and sticks more towards fantasy. Because there is a difference between fantasy elements and fantasy storytelling versus surreal storytelling. And when he gets into the more surrealism, he kind of loses me, and I sort of just don't feel that much of a connection to what he's doing. But his fantasy stuff I find very charming and creative. And especially when he's like sticks to like telling us a plot, like a solid, relatively straightforward plot. I think I enjoy that more than when he kind of like dilly-dallies, which he likes to do. And so Howl is just kind of, that's just the movie where he does that. It's a fantasy film with some great ideas and some cool visuals. I love a lot of visual stuff going on in this movie, and it's all kind of supported by a story and a cast of characters that I was really interested in. It's like 2 hours long, but it never feels as long as his other movies. It doesn't feel as long as like Ponyo did, because the pacing never really like resets in the way that movie does. The story just kind of keeps moving along and going. And I found that really, it kept me a little more invested. So Howl's Moving Castle is about this. It takes place in a kind of fantasy setting that is very like German feeling. All the characters have British accents, which I think is funny, because whenever we try to dub something into English and it's Europe, it's like it's supposed to be European inspired, we just go, British. It's like, you can speak English with a German accent too. Howl. Howl and his moving castle in Neinen. So it's about this girl named Sophie who lives in this kind of fantasy Germany type of setting. And I love the architecture. I love the scenery. I love okay, so here's the other thing. There's a lot of shots in this movie and scenes that take place in what is very much like the Western European countryside. When I was 6 years old, we went to Germany to visit my mom's hometown and her parents, who were still living there at the time. And they lived in rural Germany. And so I have a lot of affection for scenery like that. I think like, The Sound of Music, that type of countryside, just these beautiful fields of flowers and hills and these massive blue mountains looming on the skyline. I'm sure it's not a controversial thing to say that I find that's very beautiful, but there's also for me the added kind of personal aspect that I have a lot of fondness and affection for that because of, one, my cultural heritage, and also like I've been there. So that stuff was really appealing to me. I just love that setting. Like, I love that. It makes me want to go to Europe again. Right, what was I talking about? Right, so this is a world where witches and wizards exist, and they have this kind of vaguely defined, mysterious kind of magic that they use. There's never a lot of effort put into explaining how the magic works. It just kind of does stuff, and thankfully, so when you have magic like that, where I think people call it like soft magic systems as opposed to hard magic systems where you define everything really explicitly, when you do something softer like that, I think it's really important that magic doesn't just like you don't just pull it out of your ass to solve the problem. If you're going to solve something with like a softer magic, you kind of need to introduce the concept that a thing that can happen beforehand, so that it isn't just like, because when you go out and define everything, it's more like, oh, when you kind of like pull it out of your ass, it's less so that, and it's more so, oh, well, I already set up the rules that this works like this, so this is just an extension of what I've already established. And instead you're like, oh, that's clever. But when you don't define stuff and you do it like that, it's like, oh, okay, you just made a new rule up. You made up a new rule for how the magic works because you couldn't figure out how to write your way out of this situation. Howl never does that, which is nice. They just kind of like, the magic does a lot of stuff in the movie, but it never just comes out of nowhere. I need to finish talking about the premise. So Sophie gets a visit from this known kind of dangerous witch known as the Witch of the Wastes. And she tells her to like, get out of my hat shop, you fat fuck. And the witch curses her. She puts a curse on her to make her an old woman, which really surprised me. Because so now Sophie has to figure out how to break this curse of her being an old lady and get her youth back. And I was very surprised that for like 80% of the movie, they stick to her being an old woman. I thought it was going to be, I think a lot of other writers might have like fixed that, but like had a solution to the problem, or kind of only like half committed to her being an old lady. But no, there's a lot of time spent. This feels like a movie that would like Miyazaki. I don't know how old this is, in like early 2000s, I think, that he made Howl. You definitely get the sense that he had a lot of firsthand experience with elderly people, because there is a lot of, attention put towards the realities of Sophie being old and having an elderly body. Like, her fucking bones hurt, and it's hard for her to get places, and she's just slower, She's traveling out to the countryside to go find some wizard or something who can help her, and she's like, she looks back, she's like, oh my god, I've gone like nowhere. I've walked like 2 miles, and I feel like it's been like the whole day. And that's just what being old is like. Also, I think another reason, it's just like the little personal things, I guess, that kind of make me really like this movie is I live with my grandma. I live with my amachi. That's a Basque word for grandmother. I live with my amachi. And she goes on like walks every day. And it takes her like an hour to get across the neighborhood, Like, that's just what it's like. And I kind of liked that. It was like, it was like, oh, you don't see a lot of main characters who are old people, much less old women specifically. That's very rare. Miyazaki, most of his films are very female driven, but this one I kind of appreciated the uniqueness of having an elderly woman be the main character really for most of the film. So she goes and she meets this wizard named Howl. Oh, this actually happens before she gets cursed. So there's this scene where she meets Howl during like a parade. She's in like an alleyway. Howl is being chased by some magical guys, some kind of shadowy blob monster guys. And he shows up, and in that one scene with Howl, a lot of things made sense to me about Kat. And I looked over at her and I said, hey, when did you watch this movie? Like, what was the first time you watched this movie? And she said, when I was like 3 or 4. And I said, oh, okay. So this like informed your entire taste in men, didn't it? And she said, yeah. Yeah. Especially like when his hair turns like brown, like when his hair starts changing colors and it turns brown, I looked over at her and I'm like, did you swipe right on me on Tinder because you thought I looked like Howl? She's like, maybe like a little bit. He's like, you. Yeah, it's kind of, there were so many scenes where I was like, oh my God, this is where it started. Miyazaki goes out of his way to make Howl like this absurdly sexy guy, which I think is kind of rare for like male writers to be able to figure out what actually makes a man like sexy to a woman. But there's like just like the way he's shot and the way that he talks. He's voiced by Christian Bale, which is like kind of weird. It's not bad. It's a slightly weird choice because Bale has this very husky kind of voice, right? I think it ends up working. It grew on me. But just like the voice, the way he talks, the way he like refers to Sophie, and like, oh my God, like this scene where she's like cooking him she's cooking breakfast and he comes in and he gets like really close to her. And I looked at Kat and she was like fucking blushing. Oh my God. Oh, there's like one scene, like when he sets her down, like they go flying and he's like, got her, he's like behind her and he's like got her by like the arms. And he sets her down on the balcony and he's like, all right, you just stay here. You just stay here for a little bit and I'll come back or something. And she's like, oh, okay, Mr. Sexy Wizard Man. And he says something like, that's my girl. And I looked over at Kat and she was like, It was really funny. And I liked Howl a lot as a character. She meets him, she finds his castle. His castle's so cool. I thought this was really cool. When I talk about his inventiveness, Miyazaki's inventiveness, it's called his moving castle because it's this big, almost steampunk looking moving fortress with all these different bits and big bits of housing and stuff. Just a bunch of clutter, and it's on like these big metal legs that walk around. Really cool looking. And she goes inside the castle in like its back entrance, and the door outside, or the door, like the main door to get in, it has this little dial with 4 different colors, and like you twist it to like the green color, and she like the Howl's little apprentice boy, I forget his name, comes out and he's got to do some business for him. So he and again, you know, she's walked into this moving castle that's out in the countryside. He comes in, turns it to like the blue color or something. He opens the door, and it's in a city. It's just in a different city. And you open the door to it changes. There's like this little device, this little magical device thing that changes where the door leads out of. Super cool. And Howl actually has like 2 different identities in 2 different cities that he does business in. Really neat stuff. He has this the one of the main characters. This is the flame in his fireplace named Calcifer, who's this fire demon who's bound to the castle. And and he's voiced by Billy Crystal, which also, did I say Billy Crystal? It is Billy Crystal, right? I'm not confusing him with anyone else. Oh God. Okay. We're okay now. Is it Billy Crystal? It is Billy Crystal. Okay. Mike Wazowski. He's voiced by Mike Wazowski. And again, a little weird. Not bad, but he definitely feels, he's got that Mike Wazowski energy, you know? And just a little weird coming from a different looking character. I think it works. He's funny. He's cute. And he like runs all the heat throughout the castle. And it just kind of like Sophie is just she can't tell. He's trying to get the spell broken on her, but she can't tell anyone about what the spell is because that's part of the curse. She can't tell anyone that the Witch of the Wastes made her old. So she's just trying to figure out. She's getting close to Howl to figure out what if she can learn anything. You know, might as well go to a wizard. And Howl is this young guy who he's like this enigmatic weirdo. And I like that. I like the Howl as a character. I can see people not really liking him that much because he's very immature and childish. And there's like a reason for that, like a very specific reason for why he is so immature. But I kind of just found, I enjoy that kind of character because he's just like me. He's just like me for real. No, but I just always kind of liked when he was on screen because he has this sort of, he's this very like, yeah, when you kind of look at him as being just like a guy who never really grew up, he's obviously got like wisdom and knowledge and stuff, but he's also very temperamental and can get really moody, and he's very image obsessed, and he fucking throws a hissy fit when his the blonde dye comes out of his hair. And so there's like this real contrast between Howl as this cool epic wizard guy and sort of like when you get to know him and how he's sort of like he needs to do a little bit of growing up. Excuse me. And Sophie ends up like it's okay, so Howl's Moving Castle, there's a lot of classic fairy tale analogs I found in Miyazaki movies. Ponyo is like, you know, the Little Mermaid. Maybe that's the only one. But if this was going to be any one, it would be Beauty and the Beast. There's a lot of little like she's kind of forced to go to this castle. It's a little different, you know, she chooses to go to it, but the situation's a little bit out of her hands of what even motivates her to go there. She goes to this castle with this enigmatic weirdo who's like, he's like, you know, let's see, what would I describe Howl as? He's like a cool, let's see. He's a lanky, cool, when I say he's a lot like me, I mean that he's like a cool, lanky white guy who's a little fruity with it, but he's got that beast in him. I think Kat told me not to say that on the podcast. So he literally does have that beast in him because he like has this bird form, this like bird monster form that he can maintain. That's like his inner beast. That's kind of like his own curse almost. And Sophie kind of like they sort of like free each other from their own curses a little bit because Sophie realizes that her kind of falling in love with Howl is what breaks her curse. Not breaks it, but diminishes it at least. Like I really like the scenes where she gets younger and she doesn't even realize it. And there's some very subtle animation of her face getting younger and her nose changing and the wrinkles kind of her disappearing a little bit and her back kind of straightening out. And I thought that stuff was actually really clever. And I was like, oh, is she changing? And she doesn't even notice that it's happening, which I thought was funny. She doesn't even notice that like she feels differently at all, or she doesn't like look in the mirror or anything, which at first I found weird, but then I realized it's kind of important that she doesn't really notice it because she's not supposed to at that point in the film, she doesn't understand the meaning of like the message essentially. I don't know the message. She doesn't understand. She feels love for Howl, but she hasn't fully acknowledged it, I guess. And Howl kind of like her loving Howl eventually lets him get his heart back. Literally. There's some great. I love so much of the world in this movie. I want to see more of it. It's one of those settings I just want to see more of. I love with a scene where they go to the royal palace and the Queen Solomon, I think is how it's pronounced. She doesn't have like a throne room. She's in this massive garden with like this big glass dome and walls, and I love that look. I just adore a setting like that. I think it's awesome. I don't know. I found all the characters really charming. I liked the fact that I like that Sophie is like this old lady, and she has kind of, she's a little bit indignant. She's a little, I think she has a very solid protagonist. I thought Howl was really fun to watch on screen, especially whenever he was doing magic stuff. I thought his little apprentice boy was like funny. He was like a cute kind of kid character. Calcifer as this sort of not quite comic relief, but he's got a little tood to him. I like the interactions where he was telling Sophie that, oh no, only Howl can ask me to do that, and then she's just threatens to like kill him with a bucket of water, and he just, okay, fine. Doing the fucking dishes, bitch. Yes, of course, Sophie. The way he's animated is really fun too. Like a lot of just the visuals and the characters' personalities. Oh, I love the little dog that joins them halfway through the movie. The little old dog. I thought he was really cute. And he's got big old floppy ears that he flies with. And I like the whole aspect of them sort of going from it just being Howl and his little apprentice boy to then Sophie joins, then they get the little dog, and then eventually, after the Witch of the Wastes has her powers removed from her and she kind of reverts back into being a little old lady, she kind of loses like a lot of her more evil personality, which I thought was interesting. And she looks visually super different, and she's just kind of like a little old lady, and she'll just stare out the window and be like, wow. Like that's what they do. They're like building up into, like they say, like this little family. And I like that aspect a lot. I do like stories about groups of characters, funky groups of characters coming together and kind of forming little family type units. I like those. I think found families, I guess, is what they'd be called. I like stories like that. As long as the characters are interesting, or I like the characters, that's a type of story that I think, I don't know, it hits me in a very appealing spot. And I don't know, I just really had a fun time with it. I was interested in what was going on and the kind of ongoing, there isn't like a very obvious ongoing conflict. You kind of see how everything ties together near the end, but it's a lot of like inner character conflict. Sophie's trying to find out how to break her curse. Howl is kind of struggling with his, more war themes in a Miyazaki movie, crazy. Howl is struggling with his obligations to, he hates war, and there's this war going on in the kingdom that he's been called to fight in. And he's got this kind of inner immaturity, but he also like hates war, and both of those aspects kind of contribute to this conflict of them trying to enlist him for battle, which I find interesting. Again, coming from Miyazaki, a movie where one of the main conflicts is kicked off by forced enlistment, a forced draft of people. Also, hey, that scene where they're like, hey, a bunch of those like monstrous animals flying out of the airship, those are like wizards who transform themselves into monsters to attack our enemies. Flying down to like destroy themselves. Very interesting coming from Miyazaki. And Howl resents that, and he also himself has this kind of flying winged beast form that he's trying not to succumb to. Interesting. And then, I don't know, I just kind of liked everything about it. It was just a movie where I just sort of liked everything about it, and I had a good time, and I would totally be down to watch it again. So I would say it's probably my favorite so far. Maybe we only have a couple more. We only have like literally 2 more to do. Something like that, at least of the Miyazaki ones. The Miyazaki Ghibli movies. So I might, maybe I'll do a little tier list by the end of which ones I'll rate them all. Like Fast and Furious.